Hi, everybody. I'm Frank Stanisci of Candid Frank Live, where you'll find us airing our views here on the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV Channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Joining me now is Aaron William Freeland. Aaron, how you doing? I need a drink.
Doing well, Frank. You sound like things are a little dusty and dry over there.
Well, I have obviously my live picture there doesn't tell the truth about what it's like out my back window. That's my backyard. It doesn't look like that right now. If I was in my backyard right now, all you see is white. It's white from top to bottom, and because we have so many trees, that's all you see is white. It's one white.
Goodness.
Oh yeah, and it's very cold, and the poor doggies go out for their walk, and it's not pleasant for them. I don't envy their little feet hitting the ground, if you know what I mean.
Have you managed to stomp out a path for them, or?
Yeah. That stuff. I actually, the snowblower broke down, and the last couple of days I've had a really bad. My knees and my back have been really bad. I haven't been able to do as much as I might have done otherwise. So I feel bad. That's why I say I feel bad, because I haven't been able to do enough for them. And the little one comes in the house and has snowballs hanging from her neck all the way to her genitalia, and I'm sure that's not pleasant. And she's very cold, so I spend a lot of time hugging her, and ended up really soaking wet. But those are the sacrifices we parents must make for our children. And yes, I treat my dog like it's a child. I'll be the first to admit it. But it is what it is. I mean, you get to my age, and don't have to worry about little ones other than pets. And they're good. Dogs are the best friends you could possibly have.
Indeed.
How about you? How are your pets doing?
Kitty is doing fine. She actually lost one of her teeth. So,
Oh no!
She used to have a big front tooth that just hung out like a little snaggle, but it fell out at the root today. So.
Oh, okay. That almost sounds like a Shih Tzu, with the teeth scene.
Almost.
Almost, not quite though. It was an upper, not a lower.
Exactly.
All right. Listen, I'm surprising you with this. I've got two things that I wanted to talk about. That the world is crazy. If you would have suggested to me these two things, I'll start with watching the news and watching Republican congressional members walking around. They've taken their U.S. lapel pins off, the ones with the U.S. flag, right? They've taken them off, and now they put AR-15s on their lapels. So they're wearing AR-15s in homage of what? I mean, when I think of AR-15s, and if I'm an American, actually, if I'm a person, I think everybody in the world, when I think of an AR-15, that's connected to the killing of children, the killing of old people, the killing of people because of race, because of religion, and it's horrifying to see that. Now, I don't know if you've noticed it, but that's what's going on right now, Aaron. They were in Congress yesterday wearing those.
Well, I know that I did see one on the lapel of George Santos and another on the lapel of Anna Paulina Luna in committee meetings. That's interesting. I know that Andrew Clyde has worn a pin for years, but Jimmy Gomez, I think, of the Democrats, finally noticed it and said, "What's up with all these pins all of a sudden? What's going on here?" I find it interesting that this is one of those issues where they're apparently hitching their horse to the weapons bandwagon again. Now, as it turns out, Andrew Clyde actually owns a weapons store. It's actually the number 4 ranked firearms store in Georgia. So it's not really a surprise that he's wearing one. But it's apparently they're turning it into a joke as well. I know that he was saying, I've heard this little pin I've been giving out on the House floor has been triggering some of my Democrat colleagues. Uh, it's I don't know. I'm not sure what the idea is behind wearing an AR-15
Do
pin.
they even understand or have any kind of sympathy or empathy for the parents of children in Texas who were killed by such a weapon? People in churches now, what it represents and the pain that it evokes, or you want to talk about triggering the pain and suffering it triggers. Am I overly sensitive? Am I don't know. I just can't believe that, Aaron. And that's something I almost wonder whether I died and went to hell because I can't. My head explodes with the thought of what must be going through the minds of parents whose children were killed by an AR-15 or an AR-15 look-alike or act alike, right? I can't imagine what's going through their minds. I don't understand the worship of guns, because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a worship of guns. I mean, why do you think they do it? I have my own suspicions.
I Representative Andrew Clyde was saying that I give them out to remind people of the Second Amendment and how important the Second Amendment is to preserving our liberties. Um, and apparently other
Liberty?
people are getting along with that. I find it extremely coincidental that this is also noticed during National Gun Violence Survivors Week, which, seems to me to be even more tone deaf in the light of this. It's one of those. I'm not sure what the thinking is here. There seems to me to be a certain amount of cognitive dissonance or even a cognitive disconnect here when it comes to this sort of thing. It's National Gun Violence Survivors Week, but you're wearing a pin representing an AR-15. I'm not sure what the end game is here, other than generating outrage and click farming for you know
I'll just say this. I suspect in their minds, this is only a suspicion. I'll call it a logical suspicion. Logic tells me that I think in their minds, they believe so much in guns and they believe the left, and I'm only using this for the sake of the conversation. Like I said, I don't read minds. But as far as they're concerned, the fact that the left is against guns means that if there's an argument between the two, one's coming with guns and the other one's coming with, I don't know, copies of the Constitution.
and it's not even that the left is against guns. They just want better gun controls. It's not. I know plenty of left-leaning people in the states that own weapons. It's not as cut and dried as the left doesn't like guns, the right does. It's
So they won't
the
have
left
them, and
want
they won't be
responsibility.
able to defend themselves.
Well,
It's like that. If you remember that one quote that came out in the January 6th committee, which was from Trump saying, "Don't worry about those guys with the AR-15s. They're not here for me. They're not coming after me." And that's my point. That's why I say something stupid like that. That's number two. Number three is the balloon flying that flew over, the weather balloon from China that flew over Canada and now finds itself, or at least recently was over the state of Montana, where it just so happens there's a farm of ICBMs
there are
within 100
farms
miles of
full of
where it went over.
ICBMs pretty much everywhere. I mean,
Yeah,
let's be
I
honest here.
understand that. And I also understand what they're saying is that the balloon, can it or does it have, can they see more with that balloon than they can with the type of satellites everybody uses today? Like, that's the crazy thing. And that's one. And two, there's a question out there by a lot of politicians and people in general saying, well, why didn't they just shoot it down?
I think some people may feel that shooting down an errant balloon could be considered an act of war, even if that balloon is over United States sovereign territory.
Okay.
Here's another thing to remember about balloons, folks. Most of them don't have engines. So once they're up, and they are at the mercy of wind currents. So
But they're saying that this balloon, they believe it's still under the control of the people who put it up. In other words, it can change.
under control in what sense?
It the inference was at the press conference they had that it is mechanically controlled in some way. The general that did the interview did not put that, uh, almost inferred that it was happening because it was making turns. Now those turns in respect to what you're saying could have to do with wind patterns. I get that. But I'm just repeating what I heard, which is kind of crazy. And here's another tidbit that I wasn't aware of that I accidentally tripped over because I Googled it and something else came up. And it was, back about 20 years ago in the 90s, I think, there was another weather balloon, that found itself on the coast of Canada. And you'll find it. I'm sure you'll find it. Two Canadian jets shot at it and couldn't bring it down. I
I
wonder if that
remember
plays
hearing
into
about
that.
that.
I wonder if that plays into it, Aaron, the embarrassment of not being able to take it down.
Well, that was actually that case that you're referring to, I believe, was from 1998,
Yeah, there you
and it
go.
was a
Yeah.
Canadian balloon that was drifting towards Russian airspace.
Oh,
I
okay.
know Canada, Norway, and Sweden all attempted to bring it down without success.
Nope.
Apparently, CF-18s actually hit it with more than 1,000 rounds of 20
That's
millimeter
right.
cannon fire, but it didn't go down. So
No.
that's baffling in and of
Well, there
itself.
you go. I'm just
Um,
saying.
Now, the report from General Glenn Van Herk said that the balloon does not present a military or
Right.
physical threat to people on the ground at the time. I'd also heard reports that it was apparently about the size of 3 buses.
Something like that.
So
The one that
that's a big old balloon.
the one that was flying, the one in 1998 was 25 stories. That was a big ass balloon.
Yeah. Now, according to this, the China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they had said that it is a civilian airship used for research, mainly meteorological. It was affected by the westerlies, and with limited self-steering capability, it actually deviated from its intended course. The Chinese side did say they regretted the unintended entry of the airship into U.S. airspace due to force majeure. The Chinese side will continue communications with the U.S. side and properly handle this unexpected situation.
The timing was incredible. Blinken
Well,
was on his way there.
incredible or coincidental? Sometimes the two are one and the
Incredibly
same.
coincidental.
There you go.
Both. Unbelievably coincidental. I mean, the timing, we're talking in a matter, he was on his way. It all happened at the same time. Well, actually, not at the same time. The balloon, if I understand the timing of when he was going to China, which was supposed to be this morning, I think, and the balloon turned up late last night. They got wind of it, if you will, pun intended.
Ah.
That was terrible. I know. All right, let's move on. That's just a couple of things that makes your head. You just want to scratch your head. Those 3 things made me want to scratch my head today. Let's go over to hockey and let's go over to the Leafs, looking terrible against the best team in the National Hockey League is the only way I would describe it.
Yeah, I mean, the intent was for the Maple Leafs to try to have a very good game going into the All-Star break, and unfortunately, what they coughed up was very much not that. Um, Samsonov stopped 24 shots. That was his 8th consecutive game in net for Toronto. He did, after the game, say that he had been a little sick recently, but Sheldon was confident that the All-Star break would do Samsonov some good. I mean, it is February in Ontario, after all, and I'm pretty sure everybody's fighting something, whether they want to be or not. It's just one of those unfortunate things. And, especially with the weather being what it is recently, it's not surprising that individuals would get ill.
I can't disagree.
Yeah.
There is the thing that my scouting of the game, looking at it from a coaching perspective and/or identifying the main issues, positive or negative, prior to the game starting and then watching the game. What I saw that I wouldn't like if I was a Leaf person is the fact that it seemed all the goals were scored with professional hockey players having the liberty to shoot uncontested, unblocked, and not being harassed at all. And I put that on the team, not the goaltender. And I know it's easy to blame the goaltender because you do expect them to stop shots. But I'm sorry, these are professional hockey players, and if they're shooting at liberty, when was the last time we saw a shot from Austin Matthews? We saw one from Mitch Martyr. He beat the goaltender, no brewing around him, so he was able to shoot the way he wants to. I just think that's on the defensive play of the Maple Leafs, not necessarily the defenseman alone, but defensive players in particular, where a player is allowed to shoot at will without any distraction.
Yeah, it's funny when you leave professionals uncontested, they're generally pretty good at finding the open spots.
Yeah.
There was, I think, a real lack of press and urgency, I think, for the most part, on what I saw from the Maple Leafs. They killed the penalty. That's good. They were successful on one of their power plays. That's good. But their overall team defense, when it came to even strength, was a little bit lacking. Now, they only outshot Boston 35-29, so there's a close enough margin in and of itself. Um, but
It
when you
doesn't tell
leave
the
guys
score
alone,
story.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It doesn't tell the whole story. But I mean, Pavel Zacha getting his 2 goals as he did in the third period, about 3 minutes apart, and scoring 30 seconds after Kalle Yarncroke closed the gap to 3-2, really sort of put the dagger in. That's a quick goals like that, and this is, I think, a real problem with this Maple Leafs team is quick response goals can't happen.
I associate that game. It looked a lot like the Ottawa game, not just because of the scoring differential, but the same thing I just said, where it seemed, and I'll put another word on it for this game. I'm not Leaf fans relax. I'm not talking about the Leaf team for the season. I'm talking about this particular game, and I'll bunch it together with the Ottawa game. They were two games that looked like the Leafs weren't as interested as their opposition in winning. Is that a fair statement?
I think that is fair, yes.
And they could have done better in as far as giving a different impression. There was lots of room for them to play better. So this does not speak to game one of the playoffs, but it does speak to preparation for the playoffs and understanding how they shouldn't play. Um, and these two games, Ottawa and Boston, are not the way they can play, that they can afford to play. You can't give anybody free reign in front of your goaltender. I understand there are goaltenders on this planet that at times can make the saves in those cases, but what you find with every goaltender in every team, and we know it from watching Leaf games and playing great goaltenders, or great teams with great goaltenders, the Leafs don't get that much room to do stuff. That's what makes goaltenders great. Is that you make it harder for a player to think or to clearly just make a play without being concerned about anybody around them.
Yeah, I don't want to bring this up as a genuine concern, but this is something that I've noticed. In the past 10 games, the Leafs are 5-4-1. Tampa Bay is 8-2-0. Buffalo is 6-2-2. Florida is 5-3-2. Ottawa's on a 4-game win streak at 6
Right.
4 0, and Boston is 7-2-1 in their last 10. The Leafs are 5-4-1. And
Which isn't
I
good
am
enough in the Atlantic
no,
Division.
no, it's not. There is literally no breathing room when it comes to this sort of thing. I mean, as it currently stands, the Leafs are second in their division, third in the NHL. Cool, but at the same time, these sort of swoons and lapses of attention and inability to play proper team defense will eventually catch them up. I mean, New Jersey's only 2 points behind them. Dallas is only 4 points behind them. Tampa, Winnipeg, they're all 5 points behind. Seattle, 7. That this is a time where they need to be mindful of where they are in the standings and try to correct the issues that are starting to creep up again.
And not think about where they are in the standings in the seasonal framework, because that kind of distraction is not good. But to remind them that they've got to play the next 60 minutes like it matters. right?
Exactly.
And part of the issue might be that that they might be you know uh, they might be human, and you go on a great run, and then like every team, you hit a dry spell. Boston just came out of it playing the Leafs, right? They lost 3 in a row. I mean, and I don't think they lost 3 in the last like 3 months. So, definitely not the Bruin uh, team that we are accustomed to this season. They played 3 really bad games, and well, no, they lost 3 games. Frank, just leave it at that. They lost 3 games, and every team's going to go through that kind of thing. But the key here is, what are the Leafs going to do to turn it around, and are they going to learn something from this? This these 2 games they played against the Bruins. What we heard is a rumor. Now, I don't know how much truth there is to it. I'll use this word just because it's a word that they're looking for a truculent winger. They're looking for a winger that has some jam, but they're looking for one that can play in the top 6, not the bottom 6, not the top 9, but the top 6. They're looking for somebody like I think they're looking for somebody like a Wilson. It's been something that you and I both know. We both know that this is the kind of player the Leafs have lacked. Their tough guys are all top 12 players. I mean, if you know what I'm saying, they're not, they're not top 6. They're not even top 9. Those kinds of players the Leafs have had over the past few years under Dubas have been top top 12 players. They haven't been, they barely make it into the lineup. And as we saw, the Leafs brought in a little toughness, but it's not somebody they can put out there at each and every game.
Yeah, and I mean the real issue here is going to be the left hand side. You know, Michael Bunting is as great as he's played, and my love for Scarborough boys notwithstanding, um, he's not genuinely top 6. He fits well with Tavares and Marner, or he fits well with Matthews and Marner, but it's not necessarily the way you want to go. Calle Yarncroke, great defensively, not necessarily what I would consider a second line left winger. Engvall and Zach Aston Reese, they're fine where they are. It's those 2 in particular, Bunting and Yarncroke, that have me concerned. Um, in addition, they may also be needing to pick up perhaps another center with
That's what,
Matthews out. Yeah,
yeah.
you know, yeah. I
The
mean,
kind of
Tavares and
player that
Kerfoot
the
are good,
Leafs,
but
the kind of player the Leafs are looking for, and don't throw your stuff at the monitor or the TV, folks, but they're looking for an Evander Kane-ish kind of guy. That's what I see. Not necessarily with his personality, but with his tempestuousness on the ice. They we've known this for a very long time. When you have a team full of really good players, really talented players, unfortunately, you got to have. I'm sorry, I'm beginning to sound like Don Cherry or a '60s GM, right? You got to have that guy in there that keeps the other team honest. And what we saw with the Bruins, if the referees aren't going to keep you honest, I feel sorry for number 58. He got punched in the face, bleeding, no penalty, and then he gets hauled down trying to go down the ice, doesn't get a penalty. How much of that, Aaron, was because he argued? Do you think? But I don't.
um, there's this thing in the NHL that the referees tend to rely on. It's called reputation. While it's very entertaining to us to watch Michael Bunting yell at opposing players and at referees, uh, the referees all know how to use cell phones, despite most of ours opinion of their intelligence, and they do communicate with each other. So it's not really that much of a surprise to me that at this point here, Bunting is no longer getting those sorts of calls.
Well,
What I
we know
find most
there's
interesting,
we know there's a referee not refereeing anymore that said it out loud and ended up
uh,
getting canned,
what I
right?
find what I find most interesting is that Wes McCauley is still refereeing Toronto Maple Leafs games, given the history between him and his family and Sheldon Keefe.
Well, that's a story that came
So
out, and that's one that causes my eyebrows to be raised a little bit, Aaron. I didn't realize that connection, and it's amazing that it didn't get any press. You know what I mean? In Toronto, I mean, it, I'm surprised that that story has laid so low until now.
I don't think I mean a lot of people knew that that David Frost has changed his name to Jim McCauley, uh, but I don't think anybody really made the connection because our impression is in general hockey isn't necessarily that skewed and nepotistic or whatnot. Apparently, we were all wrong in that regard, and that's very much a factor as to why in certain instances, certain calls don't get made. Um, there seems to be a genuine conflict of interest there that needs to be addressed by this league, but hasn't been.
Is you know we live in a world where what unfortunately the truth of the matter is, I've said this for years and I'll say it forever, and that is that sometimes there are biases that exist without intent, like they're just things that happen. Now, as a person who witnesses that, or the people in charge, if they ignore the fact that there's something that doesn't smell right and they just let it happen, it doesn't necessarily mean the person who's doing it is the one who should be, who's the problem. The problem is if the people around, like an official that has a bent, let's say, that you're implying, suggesting, I don't blame them as much as I do as the people who are supervising them, because you know it's easy to hang that person out to dry and let them be the one to blame, and you just take the position that you're just being nice, but you're letting them do something that they shouldn't be doing. That, it's complicity. The lack of action is complicity, and we live in a world today, if we haven't learned anything, in the most important places in the world, complicity is irrelevant. A little later, we can talk about judges, the Supreme Court. This is getting very American. We could talk about the Supreme Court and how the wives are getting the family rich, and there's nothing that can be done about it. And there's an appearance, at least, of, well, conflict of interest,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, so the Leafs have to. I said this last year. I'll say it again this year. Is the Leafs have to. A lot of people enjoy watching when the Leafs lose. A lot of people can't stand it. Now, I happen to believe that the Leafs are not the best officiated team. They don't get the best officiating in the league. You can count on when the Bruins play the Leafs. There's going to be penalties that aren't going to be called, because the physical nature of the Boston Bruins, the big bad Bruin reputation, affords them a couple of shots at the Leafs that, like that punch in the face that Bunting took that caused blood. He was hit hard enough in the face with a fist that it drew blood, and nothing was called. How did that blood happen? If a stick comes up and clips him, and the referee goes to the linesman and says, "Did you see anything there that caused that blood to come out?" I think somebody would have noticed and said, "I think he got punched in the face. Are you sure?" Well, his nose just didn't just start bleeding out of nowhere, right? So yeah, so that kind of stuff, you got to expect it when the Bruins play the Leafs. They're going to get cheap shots, and the league is going to ignore them. It just is the way it is.
And the fact of the matter is, you have to learn how to play through that. And as long as they continue to squawk, it's not going to happen. So, but the only thing I can think of to do in that sort of situation is knuckle up, remember the number, and find that player later.
Remember that guy I was talking about keeping the other team honest?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that's one thing Cherry's right about, is that the fear of abuse, um, only the only fear people have of being abusive is if they might get abused, and that's just the way that is. Okay, let's go over to our first intermission, and of course, it takes us to Canada. And in Canada, the Senate passes a controversial online streaming issue. Explain it to us, Aaron. I need to learn more about this.
All right, so the Senate has passed the Online Streaming Act, known as Bill C-11, with about a dozen amendments following a lengthy study. The bill would update Canada's broadcasting rules to reflect online streaming giants such as YouTube, Netflix, and Spotify, and require them to contribute to Canadian content and make it accessible to users in Canada or face penalties. Canadian Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez says he hopes the House of Commons will pass the bill next week after it reviews the changes. Now, some of the changes include amendments to protect user-generated content and highlight the promotion of Indigenous language and Black content creators. It also includes a change that would prohibit CBC from producing sponsored content, and another that would require companies to verify users' ages before they access certain materials. The liberal government has said, well, we're going to accept some of, but not necessarily all of. There are some amendments that have been made that have zero impact on the bill and others that do. And those that negatively affect the bill will not accept. Now, a lot of people are squawking that this is going to end freedom on the internet as we know it. And, they're going to steal all of your information. And, there's a lot of hair rending and gnashing of teeth. But there have been approximately 218 witnesses at 43 meetings with 119 briefs and 73 different amendments to this bill. So it is one of the longest that's come out recently.
Well, let's be fair, though. I want to make this clear, too, Aaron. This is nothing, excuse me, it's nothing new. Netflix has made and has supported Canadian content.
Yes.
They do that. This is just let's just say, an updating of it, number one. Number two, helping, customers wasn't talked about here. There's another issue with Netflix, and that is it's one of the stories you wanted to talk about, and I guess this is a good segue where Netflix is maybe having a little hard time with this password sharing, no can do thing.
Yes, there's been a lot of backlash over this. When it initially appeared on their website, this is right at the tail end of January, they said, hey, effective February 9th, all of these changes are kicking in, and everybody went, whoa, 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 whoa. Basically, they're saying, when someone signs into your account from a device that is not part of your primary location, that device may be blocked from watching Netflix. If you are traveling, you'll need to request a temporary code to give you access for 7 consecutive days. If you're not part of the account owner's household, you'll have to sign up, and we could potentially block the owner of the account from doing anything, from giving away their password. And everybody's like, yeah, but you guys told us that sharing is caring. And what about little Tommy, who goes away to university and wants to use mom and dad's Netflix account while he's, let's say, at Simon Fraser, and mom and dad live in Ontario, or grandmama wants to use the account and she lives in Quebec, whereas I live in Ontario. And they finally changed it up, saying, well, we're going to change that now. We're going to just ask you we're going to send you a verification code that you have to enter within 15 minutes to unlock that account to permit you to use it. And you'll need to check in once a month on different devices, which, I mean, for most of us that use Netflix on a regular basis is not an issue. But they kind of realized that this whole blocking remote site users was not going to go well for them. And there was already a great groundswell of
I have an opinion in that
sentiment.
regard. Why that the consideration also has to be, Aaron, I mean, the extra users is built into the decision in purchasing the subscription, if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, and there are a certain number of different items.
If 3 people can't use it, if the family can't use it, and there's a kid that lives here and a kid that lives there, and mommy and daddy are paying for the subscription and they can't use it, mommy and daddy may make a decision about the subscription that Netflix won't like, and it'll continue the tumbling numbers that are subscribers to Netflix. It's one of those situations where, they have, before this decision, their numbers have been tumbling a little bit. They've had to forego certain programming. That helps numbers tumble. And now you do this, and the numbers are just going to tumble a little more because it's built in. When I had the subscription, my kids used it more than I did.
Yep. I mean, that's why they let you set up multiple profiles so you can tailor it for each member of the family. And if a member of the
Exactly.
family is no longer in the house, you're not going to all of a sudden bar them from access to it. That's
No, when it becomes like, I mean, it's like it's so much like everything else in life, right? If you're paying for something and someone beside you is benefiting, it makes it easier for you to pay for it, right? If the subscription goes beyond yourself, then you go, well, okay, well, maybe I'll keep the subscription. I don't want to get my daughter upset because I've canceled this. So you end up hanging on to it, even though you were thinking, you're going, I really don't need it anymore. I don't really watch it. And that's the other factor is that, not everybody watches it to the same degree. And the person who's actually paying, I wouldn't guarantee they're the ones that use it the most. So, pushing that person, telling them they can't have somebody else use it, like I said, I'm making my point a little further where I'm not really using it anyway. So you're not going to let my daughter use it. Well, I don't need the subscription. You just gave me an excuse for my daughter to say, I can't do it anymore because
yep.
you can't use it. So what's the point? Yeah. So no, it's a bad decision. It's nowadays with a lot of ways to watch stuff. A lot of it is, you know, um, streaming. Something Netflix started. There's a lot of streaming out there that you don't pay for. So they're in deep competition. My sympathy goes out to the people who create product, right? Who create programming, who don't, and musicians, and it's all there. All that stuff is there, and the government has to make decisions in trying to regulate with good intention. But you know about good intention, how that always or it may tend to end up, not always,
Yeah, the road to certain places are paved with them.
with a lot of bad stuff. Let's talk about the 3,000 long Arctic cold front that's I think it landed, Aaron. It landed here anyway. I don't know about where you are. We're at minus 21 today here.
We're currently sitting at minus 18 with a wind chill advisory in effect.
Yeah.
So it's a coming, folks. This front has been on the move for a while now. It actually hit Ontario and northern Quebec on Thursday, actually causing some ski resorts to close because of the danger of frostbite and also freezing equipment. So it's one thing if it's windy. It's another thing if it's really windy and cold because that will affect people's safety if they're using lift equipment and if they're on the slopes in general. So now temperatures are soon going to rebound, but we'll have to wait out the weekend before that actually happens.
This is a tough subject, Aaron. Medically assisted death is a tough issue. Um, like a lot of issues that have to do with medical assistance of all kinds, there's always somebody on one side, somebody on the other. And what we have here is the Liberals are tabling a bill that explain to us where it's at this point.
Well, what happened was back in 2021, the Liberal government agreed to expand eligibility after senators amended the bill, arguing that excluding people with mental illnesses would violate their rights. Now, that put a 2-year clock on the expansion to include them, which is set to expire on March 17th. This gives the Liberals 6 weeks to pass new legislation that would add a year to the delay. They're basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to delay medical assistance in dying for people whose sole condition is a mental disorder. The Carolyn Bennett, the Minister for Mental Health and Addictions, was set to join David Lametti, for a press conference. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to catch that, but we can provide additional information on that.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I'm just going to gloss over Quebec wind chills, ski hills closed. That's kind of tied to what we talked about earlier.
Yep.
Um, let's and then there's Frigid Friday. This how long? One thing you didn't mention. This blast of cold air. Is there any idea? Is it going to be over by the end of the weekend?
The impression is that it should be over by late Sunday, going into Monday morning. So we should be seeing more seasonable temperatures heading into the middle of next week. So Tuesday or Wednesday of next week.
What's this about the Alberta government thinking of pulling out of CPP? That's the Canada Pension
Well,
Plan.
there's always been this desire by Premier Danielle Smith's government to divorce themselves essentially from Canada and from all of the infrastructure that goes along with that. They're basically trying to figure out a way to create their own pension plan. Um, so, thus, people wouldn't be sending money to Ottawa for the Canada Pension Plan. They'd be sending it to the Alberta government instead. Based on their record with handling funding, I'm not so sure that's necessarily a good idea. The NDP are saying, hey, you may want to pump the brakes on this because based on your track record, it's not necessarily a good idea. There was a fair deal panel report from May of 2020 that had urged Alberta to explore it. But the UCP government under Danielle Smith seems absolutely fixated on pulling Alberta out of the CPP.
Absolutely. What about the U.S.? Sorry, not sorry. Rioters apologize, don't apologize. I'm
Well,
confused. Help me
they
understand.
initially apologized and they said, well, we were browbeaten into it by a corrupt government justice system, and now we're fighting against it. We're really patriots. You should give us money, is what it boils down to.
Okay. Listen, let's talk
Yeah.
about hockey, and in particular, the NHL All-Star Game. Action is going to be strictly that. Last year, a lot of the special events that they had, and the tricks that they pulled, and all the different competitions they had, I found a lot of it engaging and interesting. What do you think the story is this year at the All-Star Game for 2023?
Well, the NHL actually finds itself in a bit of an interesting position here with respect to this. With the recent passing of Florida's "Don't Say Gay" bill, as well as the NHL's efforts at diversity and inclusion, having it in Sunshine, Florida, and in Miami seems a bit of an odd choice. But for those interested, the All-Star Skills Competition kicks off in about another 17 minutes tonight. It'll be on CBC, Sportsnet, and TVA in Canada, while ESPN and ABC will have coverage of the weekend in the States. There's going to be mini games like Splash Shot and Pitch and Puck to go along with your classic all-star events. And now, Splash Shot is set to take place on the beach. 4 teams of 2 players will be required to hit targets in an attempt to dunk their opponent in a water tank. So the teams to dunk their opponent first win this single elimination tournament. Participants are going to be Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Cale Makar, Igor Shesterkin, Adam Fox, Brady, and Matthew Tkachuk. Pitch and Puck. Now, as everybody knows, NHL players love to golf as well as play hockey. This is the perfect
They don't
setting.
admit it, though, because, it's associated with not making it to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah. I get the early tea time jokes every single year.
Yeah, there you go. Your April tea times.
6 players are going to face off on a par 4 hole with an island green, using pucks and balls to achieve the lowest score and to be declared winners. Participants are going to be Johnny Gaudreau, Clayton Keller, Jason Robertson, and Nick Suzuki. They have another event called the Tendy Tandem. Goalies are going to be getting a little more love here. Basically, 8 all-star goalies are going to compete in teams of 2, with one taking part in the shooting facet and the other tending the goal. The shooter is going to take a shot from a designated spot and will accumulate points based on where he places the puck in the net. Based on how well the shooting goalie does, his counterpart in net will face a number of skaters in a shootout. If the goalie in net makes a save, his team earns full points. The game continues until every puck is shot, and the tandem with the most points wins. Don't worry, I'm just as confused. I'm going to have to make sure that I watch it to get it. But the participants in that are going to be Hellebuck, Saros, Shesterkin, Skinner, Sorokin, Logan Thompson, Linus Olmark, and Andrei Vasilevsky. The shooters, here's a fun list, are going to be Hillary Knight, Emily Kark, Rebecca Johnson, Sarah Nurse, and Alex Carpenter. So they're getting some of the PWHPA women's players, some gold medal
Yeah,
winners.
they're heavily involved in this. It was very
Yep.
successful when they had the race around the rink. Many were impressed with the female hockey player.
Yeah, and
Let's
speaking
talk
of,
about. Go ahead.
I was going to say the last 3 events I wanted to mention are, of course, the fastest skater, the hardest shot, and the breakaway challenge. So there's the rest of the events for you.
Okay. Bo Horvat and Elias Patterson are going to have their last ride, as referred to by Patterson. Tell us about that and their feelings about the trade, I guess, come out.
Yeah, Bo Horvat, as everybody knows, was traded this past week. It's unfortunate that he's gone, but he did go to the New York Islanders. So he and Elias Pettersson are going to be teaming up together for the last time. The NHL has decided in their infinite wisdom that Bo will be suiting up for the Pacific Division, while still being a New York Islander, which is confusing in and of itself. But yeah, they were they were good friends. So skating in their last All Star game together, it's been difficult. They've had a bit of a tough weekend to get through. Um, Pettersson said, it's tough to see it happen, but business is business. At least we get one more game together, and hopefully we'll see each other a little later in the playoffs, and we'll have a chance to play against each other.
Let's go to Major League Baseball. The Toronto Blue Jays' Alex Manoah feels that he was body shamed by someone on the Major League Baseball network. Tell us about it, Aaron.
So, there was a commentator named Anthony Recker on MLB talking about baseball and about who he'd like to have on his team. And he said, well, he went through the list of players and he got to Alec and he said, Alec, I love you, Alec. Just show me you're willing to put a little more time in at the gym and that you're going to be there consistently for a little bit longer. Alec Manoah, of course, didn't appreciate that, and he fired back with, buddy, what I do in the gym has clearly worked. Check the numbers. It sucks you can't say the same about yours.
Well, baseball's not, body shaming in baseball. There are too many temptations out there for baseball players because they're pretty. Imagine if you stretch it to umpires. It is something that is especially something that is not unusual in baseball. So this is a story. I'm not saying it's a nothing burger, but there's a lot of these nothing. There's a lot of them to go around as far as, these kinds of criticisms. It's still not necessary. The Dodgers CEO says that everybody in management agreed that Trevor Bauer needed to go.
Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, he was released by the Dodgers in January, over a year after he was first accused of assaulting a woman sexually. Bauer was eligible to return to the team in January after a suspension was reduced from 324 to 194 games. Once the suspension was reduced, the Dodgers had 14 days to make a decision, and they finally wound up releasing him. Team CEO Stan Kasten, along with other Dodgers executives, met with reporters Wednesday. They said that the decision we reached was unanimous among the people that are charged with having to make this decision. I'm not going to get into contradicting or agreeing with anything about what was supposed to be a private conversation. I'll just say within a very short time, we came back and made our decision. I think that speaks in and of itself.
Curly Gittins signs with the Toronto Argonauts, a star Canadian player.
I'm very happy to see him back. He's extended through 2025, I believe, which is a 3-year deal, which is rather unique in the CFL, in that most players sign on a year-by-year or 2-year basis. So glad to have him locked up for the Double Blue for the foreseeable future.
Ticats released Don Jackson.
Yeah, so he said that basically it's time for me to move on to my next chapter. Thank you, Hamilton. Thank you, Calgary. Thank you, Canada. He played 14 games, including 12 starts over 2 seasons with the Ticats, and registered 544 yards on 122 carries.
Red Blacks' Tavon Smith signs a 1-year extension.
Yeah, now he was due to become a free agent in another 10 days. Smith had a bit of an injury-troubled year in 2022, only appearing in 8 games. And he had 14 passes for 142 yards. But they obviously feel confident enough in his abilities that they want to make sure that they bring him back now that he's recovered.
Lions extend All-Star Gary Peters through 24.
Yeah, now Peters was another one of those players that was eligible to become a free agent on February 14th. But he feels that coming back, even without potentially Nathan Rourke, is a good fit for him. He originally signed with the Lions as a free agent in 2018 and has suited up on all 68 regular season games for them.
Excellent. Aaron, it was fun as usual.
I appreciate that, Frank. It's always fun to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I'm Candid Frank. He's Aaron William Freeland. I want to say thank you for watching us tonight, and we'll see you again next week.
Take care, everyone.